She walked into her husband's office 7 months pregnant, carrying anniversary roses and a secret gender reveal. What she found instead was betrayal in broad daylight. His mistress on the desk spit on her face and her husband laughing as if her pain were entertainment. But what he did not know was that someone far more powerful had already been watching, collecting evidence, and preparing to bring his entire world down.
7 months pregnant, Caroline walked into her husband's office with anniversary flowers. But the surprise was hers. His mistress was on his desk, and when Caroline begged him to make her leave, he just stood there. He did nothing. The mistress stared right at her and then spit in her face, and her husband laughed. He actually laughed. But Caroline's billionaire father was watching. For 6 months, he had been building a case, just waiting for this exact moment. And that moment was now. The story that follows is shocking. It is full of betrayal and boiling secrets. A powerful man thought he was safe, but revenge was coming. This is how a woman lost it all and how her father destroyed the man who took it. You need to hear this whole story. What happens at minute 75 is unforgettable. The spit was warm on her cheek, but all she heard was her husband's laugh. That sound would haunt Caroline Webb Holbrook forever. Not the spit, not the mistress's perfume. It was not even the shock that froze her. It was Grant's laugh. The same laugh she fell in love with 7 years ago, the one from their wedding day. The one that used to fill her with so much joy. Now, it was a weapon pointed at her heart, and the wound was deep. So, let's go back to the beginning. Back to the morning before her world fell apart. Caroline Webb Holbrook still believed in her life, her husband, her marriage. Her alarm showed 6:45 when she woke. Golden autumn light streamed into the bedroom. She stayed in bed for a moment, her hand on her round belly. She could feel the new life inside her. At 7 months or 30 weeks, the app said her daughter was as big as a cabbage. She checked it every single day. The baby gave 2 strong kicks. A little hello. Caroline smiled. Today was October 15th, their 4th anniversary. It had been 4 years since she wore her grandmother's veil. 4 years since Grant had wept when he saw her. 4 years of building their life. In just 2 months, their family would finally be complete. She turned over, but his side of the bed was empty. The sheets felt cold. Grant was gone early again. It was happening a lot. A big merger, he'd say. Critical negotiations. He would ask if she understood, and she always did. Good wives always understood. The hot shower felt good on her aching back. This pregnancy had been hard on her. She had gained 42 pounds. Her ankles were swollen by lunchtime. He told her she was glowing. He said she was beautiful. He claimed he loved her more than ever. Grant said many things. She picked out a blue dress that still fit her. He had complimented it months earlier at a company party. "You look like the ocean," he had whispered, his hand on her back. Beautiful, deep, and mysterious. She clung to those words on hard days. She remembered them when he came home late, when he smelled like another woman's perfume. But she did not suspect a thing. He traveled, met with female clients. It was perfectly normal. She told herself she was not jealous or courteous. It was just the pregnancy hormones making her insecure. The drive to his office took 45 minutes. Caroline hummed along with the radio. They were playing old love songs from their wedding, songs by Etta James and Frank Sinatra. Music with meaning, Grant used to say. 24 white roses sat buckled into the passenger seat. Grant's favorite. She had ordered them 3 days in advance to be sure they were flawless. They had long stems and a cream silk ribbon. She also booked a table at Maison Laurent. It was the restaurant of their first date. He had ordered in perfect French, and she fell for him right then. She reserved table 7, their special spot by the garden. Everything had to be perfect for her big announcement. She was having a girl. She learned at the ultrasound yesterday. Keeping it secret for 24 hours was so hard. She knew Grant wanted a boy to carry on the family name and play baseball. But she saw how he was with his niece. She saw him melt around other people's babies. Caroline knew in her heart he would adore a daughter. He would love her more than anything. Her plan was absolutely perfect. The lobby of Holbrook Industries was all marble and glass. A giant chandelier sparkled overhead. The building was a symbol of Grant's success. 10 floors and 300 employees. He said he built it all himself, but her father's money had helped him start. Grant called it seed money. He said his vision made the company grow. Caroline signed in with security. The guard, Marcus, smiled at her belly. He said it would not be long now. He had worked there for years. He had even been to their wedding. 2 more months, Caroline said, her hand on her belly. When he asked about the baby, she told him it was a surprise for Grant's anniversary. For a split second, Marcus's smile vanished. She almost did not see it. How lovely, he said. But his voice was different. She told herself it was just her pregnancy brain. The elevator went up to the 23rd floor. This was Grant's executive level. She knew this floor so well. She had brought him lunch and coffee here many times. She had been the proud wife at company parties. The elevator doors opened. The reception area was quiet. His assistant's large mahogany desk was completely empty. That was very strange. Patricia was never away from her desk. Grant called her his right hand. Caroline's heels echoed on the hardwood floor. The silence felt strange. The whole floor felt empty. And then she heard a sound. It was laughter from Grant's office. His familiar, warm laugh. But there was another laugh, too, a woman's laugh. Caroline's heart started pounding. She told herself it was just a business meeting. But this felt different. This felt very wrong. The laughter felt too intimate, too comfortable. It sounded like how he used to laugh with her. She saw his name in gold letters on the frosted glass door. Inside, 2 shadows were moving very close to each other. Her hand shook as she reached for the door. She told herself not to be a paranoid, jealous wife. She told herself not to be crazy. Then she opened the door. The image in front of her burned into her mind forever. She saw every single detail. Sunlight poured through the windows. The room smelled of his cologne and her perfume. There were whiskey glasses on the desk, and there was his Grant, her husband, the father of her child. His tie was loose and his sleeves were rolled up. A woman was perched on his desk. Her expensive dress showed off her long legs. Her hand was on his chest in a way that was far too familiar. Caroline recognized her instantly. It was Brittany Mercer, Grant's old girlfriend from college. He had told her Brittany meant nothing. He said it was just ancient history. He promised it was never serious. Brittany looked even better than her old photos. Perfect hair, perfect lips, and a perfect body. A body that had never been pregnant. The bouquet of flowers just fell from her hands. They made a soft sound on the floor. White petals scattered across a dark carpet like snow, or tears, or maybe the shattered pieces of her own heart. Grant did not get up. He made no move toward her. He did not even look sorry. He looked irritated, bothered, as if she had walked in on an important meeting. "Caroline," he said, his voice completely flat and cold, a voice she barely knew. "You should have called before coming." The words were so casual, so heartless. It was as if she were a delivery person, not his wife of 4 years, standing there 7 months pregnant with his baby. Brittany slid gracefully off the desk. She did not run away, or look ashamed, or say she was sorry. Instead, she smiled, a cruel smile that felt like sharp, broken glass. "Well, look what we have here," Brittany said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "The prized mare has arrived." Prized mare. The word struck Caroline with the force of a punch. To them, she was not a wife or a person. She was just an object, a way to get what they wanted. Her hand went to her belly to protect her child. Her baby suddenly kicked, a hard and urgent movement, as if it sensed the terrible danger. It was as if the baby knew the world was now a much scarier place. "Grant," Caroline's voice was a whisper, so much smaller than she wanted it to be. It was the voice of a woman who had already lost everything without even knowing the fight had begun. "What is this?" But it was not really a question. She knew exactly what it was. Deep down, she had known for months. She had seen all the clues, but had lied to herself about what they meant. The late nights at the office, the sudden business trips, the way he would pull away from her touch, the unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, the strange charges on the credit card bill. She had known all along. She just did not want to accept the truth. Grant leaned back in his big office chair. He glanced at Brittany, then at Caroline, then looked up at the ceiling. He acted like this was all a giant waste of his time, as if her pain was completely boring to him. "This is not what it looks like," he said. It was the oldest excuse in the book, the lie every unfaithful husband tells. She had seen it in movies and read it in books. She always wondered what kind of person would be foolish enough to believe those words. Now she knew. It was the kind of person who was desperate, who had built her whole world around one man. A person who would have nothing left if her marriage was a lie. Brittany let out a high, sharp laugh that would echo in Caroline's nightmares. She walked slowly and confidently toward Caroline. Every step was meant to be threatening. She stopped just inches from Caroline's pregnant belly, so close that Caroline could smell her strong perfume. It was an expensive and sickeningly sweet smell, like flowers left to rot in a hot room. "Did you really think you could hold on to him?" Brittany asked. Then she pointed to Caroline's belly, her lip curled in disgust. "With a baby? That is just so pathetic. Did you think getting pregnant would magically make him love you?" The cruelty of her words was stunning. She said it so casually, as if destroying someone's life was just a normal part of her day. "Grant," Caroline said again. Her voice was stronger now and much colder. "Tell her to leave." She stared at her husband's face, waiting for him to finally stand up for her, to defend her, to remember the promises he had made to her 4 years ago. 1 second passed, and 2, then 3. The big clock on his office wall just kept ticking loudly in the awful silence. Grant did not say a word. He just sat in his expensive chair, wearing his expensive suit in his big, expensive office. And he did nothing at all. Mistress assaulted his pregnant wife. His silence was the only answer Caroline needed. Brittany tilted her head to the side, looking at Caroline like a bug under a microscope. Then she did something so horrible that Caroline would see it in her dreams for the rest of her life. She slowly, hatefully, gathered a saliva in her mouth. She made sure Caroline could see exactly what she was doing, making the moment last as long as possible. Then she leaned in and spit right in Caroline's face. First, Caroline felt the warmth on her cheek, then the disgusting wetness. Then came the complete and total shock that this was really happening. She could not believe another human being would do such a thing, or that her own husband was just sitting there watching it happen. Caroline stood there, completely frozen. Her hand started to lift to her cheek, then froze in midair. She did not know what to do. Wiping it away felt like admitting defeat, but leaving it there felt impossible. So she just stood perfectly still with the spit slowly dripping down her face. Her husband's mistress smiled at her, looking proud, as if she had just won a prize. Her husband just sat there, watching the entire thing with a look of detached amusement. And then Grant laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a shocked laugh. It was a real laugh, deep and full, as if Brittany had just told the funniest joke in the world. He laughed at his pregnant wife, who was standing there with another woman's spit on her face. And in that moment, something inside of Caroline shattered into a million pieces. She did not start crying or yelling. She just turned around and walked out of the office. She went past the empty front desk, got into the elevator, and went down 23 floors. She walked through the fancy marble lobby, past a security guard named Marcus, who refused to look at her, and went out to the parking garage. She could not remember a single step of the journey. The next thing she knew, she was in her car with the engine off. The parking garage was cold and dark. It smelled of concrete, exhaust fumes, and hopelessness. She sat in her car for 7 minutes. She counted her breaths, the ceiling panels, and all the parking spots visible from her windshield. 12, 18, 12, 18. The numbers meant nothing, but they were the only thing stopping her from screaming out loud. Her baby gave a little kick, then another, then a third. A tiny reminder saying, "I am here, Mama. I am real. No matter what else is a lie, I am the truth." Caroline finally started the engine. Her hands still shook. The spit on her cheek had dried, but she could still feel it. She knew she would feel that phantom touch of humiliation for weeks, even months. It would not wash away. She did not drive home. She could not bear to go back to that house, a house paid for with Grant's money, a house with their wedding photos on all the walls, a house where she had truly believed they were building a life together. So she just drove to the one place she knew she would be safe. She drove to Meredith's apartment. Meredith Cole lived in an old warehouse that had been turned into apartments. It had exposed brick and huge factory windows with a fire escape that looked down on a little garden 4 floors below. It was the kind of place Caroline used to dream of living in before she married Grant and moved into a house with 6 bedrooms and a 2-car garage. She did not even call first. She just drove there automatically, parked her car, and took the big freight elevator up to the 4th floor. Meredith opened the door, wearing comfortable yoga pants and a big sweater. Her dark hair was up in a messy bun, and she was holding a cup of coffee. She took one look at Caroline's tear-streaked face and the dried spot on her cheek. Her expression changed from surprise to deep concern and then to a sad understanding. She did not say a word. She just put her coffee down, opened her arms wide, and Caroline collapsed into her embrace. Caroline cried for 23 minutes without stopping. They were deep, body-shaking sobs that she could not control. She cried until her throat felt raw and her eyes were puffy and swollen. Meredith just held her the whole time, stroking her hair and making soft, comforting sounds. The tears finally stopped, not because she felt any better, but because there were simply no more tears left to cry. Meredith helped her to the big, comfortable couch and put a blanket over her shoulders. She made her a cup of tea, which Caroline did not drink, but holding the warm mug gave her shaky hands something to do. "Tell me," Meredith said, her voice soft but also very serious. "Tell me exactly what happened." And so Caroline told her everything. She told her about being at the office, about Brittany, about the spit, and she told her about Grant's horrible laugh. She described the way he had looked at her, as if she was a complete stranger, as if they're 4 years together, and the baby meant nothing. By the time she finished her story, the tea in her hands was cold. The afternoon sun had moved across the sky, making new patterns of light and shadow on the brick walls. The city outside was still busy and loud, completely unaware that her whole life had just been destroyed. Meredith sat across from her with a strange expression on her face. She looked like she was trying very hard to hide her true feelings. "Please say something," Caroline whispered. "I am going to kill him," Meredith said. "I am not joking, Caroline. I am going to drive over to that office, put my hands around his neck, and squeeze until his stupid, handsome face turns purple." "You will end up in jail," Caroline said. "It would be worth it," Meredith replied. The dark joke did not make either of them feel better. Caroline just stared down into her cold cup of tea. She could see her own reflection, and she looked pale and empty like a ghost. "He laughed," she said, her voice cracking. "He just watched her do that to me, and then he laughed, as if I was the joke, as if our entire marriage was just one big joke that I was too dumb to understand." "You are not dumb," Meredith said firmly. "I feel dumb. I feel like the biggest fool in the entire world." Caroline put the mug down and covered her face with her hands. "How could I have been so blind? How did I not see what was happening?" "Because you were in love with him," Meredith said softly. "Because you trusted him. That is what you are supposed to do when you are married. I should have seen it coming. All the clues were right there. The late work nights, the hushed phone calls, the bored way he would look at me, as if my very presence was a letdown. But I told myself to stop. I blamed the perfume scent on business meetings. I decided the pregnancy hormones were just making me paranoid." A broken laugh escaped her lips. "Maybe I am just losing my mind. Perhaps this is all a bad dream, and tomorrow I will wake up and it will all be normal again." Meredith sat down beside her, grabbing her hands and holding them tight. She said, "Look at me, Carolyn, look at me." So Carolyn did. "You are not losing your mind, and you are not dreaming. What you saw today really happened. What he did was completely real, and you are not to blame for any of it. But I should have known." "No, just stop. Do not say you should have known. Do not say you could have done something. This is only about what he did. He lied to you. He shamed you. He allowed another woman to hurt you while you carry his baby. That is all on him. None of this is your fault." Those words slowly soaked into her, like rain on dry ground. Carolyn wanted so badly to believe them. She desperately needed to not be the bad guy in her own story. "Meredith," she began slowly, "you do not seem very surprised." A strange look flashed across Meredith's face. It was a mix of guilt and fear. "What are you talking about? When I told you about Brittany, about the affair, you did not act shocked. You looked like you already knew about it." The silence grew for 5 seconds, then 10, then 15. "Meredith, what secret are you keeping from me?" Meredith shut her eyes. When she opened them, they were filled with tears. "I should have told you a long time ago," she said. "I really wanted to. Oh, I wanted to tell you so many times. But you always seemed so happy. Or I thought you were. I just did not want to be the person who ruined it all for you." A pit formed in Carolyn's stomach. "Tell me what, Meredith?" "Brittany is not a new person in his life. This affair did not just begin. Meredith's voice trembled. I saw them together 2 years ago at a marketing conference in Chicago. The same trip Grant had called strictly a business trip. 2 years. The words bounced around in Carolyn's mind. 2 years. 2 years. 2 years ago, she was busy booking their anniversary vacation to Italy. She was choosing the most romantic hotel in Florence, even learning some Italian phrases to order their meals. 2 years ago, she was setting up the baby's room for the first time. That was the pregnancy that did not last. The child she lost at the heartbreak had almost completely destroyed her. 2 years ago, Grant held her as she wept for their lost baby. He had promised they would try again. He swore that he would never let anything tear them apart. 2 years ago, he was already with Brittany Mercer. You saw them, Carolyn stated. Her voice distant as if another person was speaking for her. In Chicago, at the hotel bar. I was there for a work event, just by pure chance. I went inside and I saw them. His hand was resting on her leg. Her head was on his shoulder. It was the way they were looking at each other. Meredith wiped away her tears. I knew, Carol. In that single moment, I knew exactly what was going on. And you kept it from me. I wanted to tell you. I must have reached for the phone 100 times. But Grant discovered that I had seen them. He showed up at my apartment the very next day. He said I had the wrong idea. He claimed Brittany was just an old friend going through a tough time. He said she just needed a friend and he was only being there for her. And you fell for that? But no. Then he told me something else. Meredith's expression filled with pain. He said, Dad, that you were delicate, still getting over the miscarriage. He told me that news like this might send you into a dark place. He said he was worried for you, that you were already seeing problems that did not exist. He convinced me that telling you the truth would cause you more harm than gaslighting. The word floated in Carolyn's thoughts from a dark place. She knew what it was. She had seen shows about relationships built on lies. She had always believed she was too clever to ever be a victim of something like that. But Grant was not just gaslighting her. He was doing it to her friends as well. He was painting a picture of her as an unstable woman. He made it so her own thoughts could not be trusted. He made sure that anyone who tried to help her would look like they were hurting her instead. He made you question what you saw with your own eyes, Carolyn said quietly. He made you believe that to protect me, you had to lie to me. I am so very sorry, Carol. I should have told you the truth no matter what. I should have believed you were strong enough to know. I should have. Stop. Carolyn raised a hand. I am not mad at you. You have every right to be. Maybe I will be later, but not now. For now, all of my anger is reserved for him. Her phone began to buzz. It buzzed again, and then a third time. She glanced at the screen. She had 3 new messages from Grant. The first one said, "You completely overreacted." The second message said, "It was only a joke. You know Brittany has a very dark sense of humor." The third one said, "Come back home. You are being so dramatic. You are going to put the baby under stress." Carolyn read his words over and over. Each word felt like a small cut. Each message was a lie covered in fake worry. You overreacted, as if getting spit on was something a normal person just ignores. It was a joke, as if you can make an assault okay by calling it funny. You are being dramatic. That was his favorite line, his way of telling her that her feelings were the issue, not his actions. You were going to stress the baby. He was using their own child as a weapon, turning her pregnancy into just another way to control her. What is he saying? Meredith asked. Carolyn showed her the phone. She watched her friend's face change from shock to fury and then to a cold, hard rage. The nerve of that man, Meredith whispered. The absolute nerve. He actually believes I will just come home. He thinks I am going to say I am sorry for causing trouble. He expects this all to be forgotten by the time we eat dinner. Will it be? Carolyn thought of the empty house, the big bed she now shared with a man she did not know, and the nursery she had filled with so much hope. The wedding picture on the wall that she would now have to see every day. I do not know, she confessed. I really do not know what I should do. I do not have anywhere else to go. My entire life is connected to him. The house is in his name and mine. Our bank accounts are shared. My life has been all about being Mrs. Grant Holbrook. Then we will just build you a new one. With what money? I stopped working after we married. He told me he wanted me to make our house a home, to be ready for family. I abandoned my entire career for him. I gave up my whole life for him. The truth of her problem hit her like a giant wave. She was 7 months pregnant with no job and dependent on a man who had watched another woman spit on her. What could she possibly do? Where could she possibly go? How could she take care of a baby when she had spent the last 4 years making her whole world fit inside his? "You should call your father," Meredith said in a soft voice. Carolyn pulled back. "I cannot do that." "Can you not?" Because she stopped, searching for the right explanation. "I never told him we were having problems or about the arguments or anything. On our Sunday calls, I just pretend that everything is wonderful. I have been lying to my own parents for months. They would want to know the truth, I know that. But I felt so ashamed. I am so ashamed. They tried to warn me about Grant. You remember, right before our wedding, my father said something felt wrong. He said Grant was too smooth, too private, and tried too hard to make a good impression. I told my dad he was just being a worried father. I said I was doing." Carolyn gave a sad laugh. "I told my own father he did not trust me to make good decisions. And here I am now proving that my judgment was as terrible as he thought it was." "Your father loves you," Meredith said. "It does not matter what happened in the past or what advice you did not take. He loves you, and he would want to be there for you right now." Carolyn knew Meredith was right. Richard Webb was a lot of things. He was tough and demanding and a man who expected the best from everyone. But deep down, he was her dad, and he would do anything to keep his daughter safe. The only issue was if she was ready to ask for his help. "I need some time to think," Carolyn said. "I just need a moment to figure things out. I cannot decide anything at this moment." "Okay, that is perfectly fine. You can stay in my guest room for as long as you want." "Thank you so much, Meredith. Do not thank me. I am the one who should have told you what I knew years ago. I should have believed in you, instead of thinking you were some fragile doll." Meredith gave her hands one last squeeze. "I promise I will not make that mistake ever again." That night, Carolyn was lying in Meredith's guest room. The bed felt too soft. The pillows had a strong lavender smell. Through the large windows, she could hear the sounds of the city. She heard passing cars, muffled conversations, and a distant siren's wail. Staring at the ceiling, she counted every crack and shadow, tallying up all the ways her life had shattered in one afternoon. "I am not imagining things," she told herself. "I know what I saw. I know what I felt on my cheek." Her baby kicked again, hard and insistent, a reminder that even if everything else was broken today, this one thing was whole, this one thing was real, this one thing was worth fighting for. "I will not let him take you," Caroline whispered to her stomach. "I will not let anyone take you from me." And deep in the darkness, an idea started to grow. It was as fragile as a newborn, but it gained strength with every single breath. The next morning arrived gray and unwilling. Rain slid down the large windows of Meredith's apartment. The city was quiet below, lost in the fog and the hiss of wet roads. Carolyn had not been able to sleep. Each time her eyes closed, she saw it happen again. The ugly spit, the cruel laugh, the look on Grant's face. The scene replayed over and over, a terrible movie with no end. Her phone had vibrated 12 more times during the night. She did not look at the messages because she did not have to. She knew exactly what they would say. They would be filled with blame that pretended to be concern. They would be full of manipulation that sounded like love. At 6:45, the phone rang, an actual call this time. Grant's name glowed on the screen. Caroline just stared at it. It rang 1, 2, 3, 4 times before going to voicemail. A minute later, a new text message popped up. It said, "We need to talk. This is ridiculous. Come home so we can work this out like adults." Like adults. As if she was the one acting like a child, as if she was the one who had to grow up. Just then, Meredith stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. She looked like she had not slept well either. Dark shadows were under her eyes, and her shoulders were tight. Caroline knew that look. It was a look of protective anger. "He is calling," Meredith said, not asking a question. "He has called every hour since midnight. Are you going to answer it?" "No." The word felt stronger than Caroline thought it would. "Not now, and maybe I will never answer him again." Meredith gave her one of the mugs. The coffee was dark and bitter, which was exactly what she needed. She held the warm mug with both hands, feeling the heat sink into her cold fingers. "I have been thinking," Caroline said slowly, "about what I should do next, and I know I need help. Real help. The kind of help I cannot get from my friends or from a lawyer. She took in a deep breath. I need to call my father. The words felt heavy in the quiet room. They were filled with so much meaning. Richard Webb was not just a regular father. He was Richard Webb, the man who started Webb Industries. He was a billionaire who built a huge company from nothing with pure willpower and hard work. Magazines wrote stories about him every year. Business schools studied his successful plans. His rivals would whisper his name just before he would defeat them. He was also the most intimidating man Caroline had ever known. Not because he was mean, but because he was so completely and terrifyingly good at everything he did. When Richard Webb decided to do something, it got done. There were never any exceptions or excuses. "Are you really sure?" Meredith asked in a soft voice. "No," Caroline laughed, but it was a sad, broken sound. "I am not sure of anything right now, but I know I cannot face this by myself, and I know that my father will know exactly what to do." She reached for her phone. Her fingers shook a little as they moved over the contact that just said Dad. It was the same number she had called every Sunday for 14 years. It was the same voice that always made her feel safe. But this was not going to be a normal call. This call was going to change her entire life. She pushed the call button. The phone only rang once. Richard Webb answered before it could ring a second time. "Sweetheart." His voice was perfectly calm and controlled, like always. But she could hear something else underneath it, something sharp and focused. "This is an early call for you. Is everything okay?" And with those few simple words, Caroline's composure shattered. The whole story just poured out of her. She told him about what happened at the office, about Brittany, about the spit and the horrible laugh. She told him about the last 2 years of lies. She described how Grant twisted her words and made her feel crazy. She admitted to all the small cruelties she had ignored. She told him absolutely everything. After she was done, the phone line was silent for 11 long seconds. She counted every single one of them. Each second felt like forever. Then Richard Webb spoke 5 words that changed her world. "I will be there by morning." "Daddy, you do not have to do that." "Yes." His voice was gentle, but there was something hard and cold beneath it. For the first time, Caroline understood why so many people were afraid of him. "I do. I am so sorry. I should have told you about this sooner. I should have listened to you when you tried to warn me. I should have." "Stop." His command was quiet, but it was final. "We can talk about that later. What I need right now is for you to tell me where you are. I need you to stay in that place, and I need you to promise me one thing." "What is it?" "Do not return to that house. Do not answer his calls. Do not talk to him at all until I have arrived."
"Can you do that for me?" "Yes." "Good. I love you, Caroline. No matter what has happened or what mistakes you made, I love you, and I promise you I will fix this." He hung up the phone. Caroline just sat there, holding her phone while her coffee got cold.
"He is on his way," she said to Meredith. "I thought so." He sounded different. I have never heard him sound like that in my entire life. Meredith was quiet for a second. Then she said very carefully, "Your father is a dangerous man, Carol. He is not a violent man, but he is dangerous in a different way. He is the kind of man who can completely ruin people. I know. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with whatever he is planning to do to Grant?" Caroline thought about her answer for a long time. She remembered the spit on her cheek and the sound of laugh. She thought about the years of lies and manipulation. Then she thought about the baby girl growing inside her, who was depending on her to stay safe. "Yes," she said with certainty. "I am okay with that." The rest of the day was a complete blur.
Carol tried to have some breast,
but only managed to eat half a slice of toast. She tried to take a nap but just lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She tried to read a magazine but could not focus on the words. Meredith stayed with her, making tea and telling silly jokes to fill the empty silence. It did help a little bit. At 7:45 that night, Grant arrived at Meredith's apartment. He started pounding on the door without any warning. 3 loud knocks shook the entire doorframe. Then they heard his voice, loud and angry. "Caroline, I know you are in there. Open this door right now." Caroline felt frozen. Her heart started to pound. The baby kicked inside her, as if it such a sense of fear. Meredith jumped to her feet and walked to the door, but not to open it. She stood in front of it like a guard. "Go away, Grant!" she yelled through the door. "She does not want to talk to you." This is not your business, Meredith. This is between my wife and me. Your wife? The one you let another woman attack yesterday? You mean that wife? There was a short pause. Then his voice changed, trying to sound reasonable. That was just a misunderstanding. Brittany is just a friend. Caroline got the wrong idea. She got the wrong idea about someone spitting in her face. Look, I only want to talk to her. Just for 5 minutes. That is all I am asking for. Caroline found her strength and walked toward the door, even though she wanted to hide. Grant, she said, her voice shaking a little. Please leave. Caroline, baby, just let me explain everything to you. There is nothing you can explain. There is so much to explain. You are acting completely crazy right now. This is what I was afraid of. Your mental health has been so bad lately, and now you are having some kind of breakdown. I am not having a breakdown. Then why are you hiding from your husband? Why will you not have a normal conversation? This is not how a normal person behaves, Caroline. I am very worried about you. The way he twisted her reality was so clear to her now. How could she have ever believed him? How did she ever think that she was the problem? Go home, Grant. Not until we have a chance to talk. Not until you stop behaving like a child and face me. If you are not gone in the next 30 seconds, I am going to call the police. For what? For a husband trying to see his wife? The police will laugh at you. For harassment. For trespassing. For anything else my lawyer thinks of. There was another pause. A much longer one this time. Lawyer. Grant's voice was different now. It was hard and cold. So you are already talking to lawyers. My father will be here in 3 hours. He is bringing Ted Ashford with him. I am sure they will have a lot they want to discuss with you. The silence on the other side of the door felt different now. Caroline could almost hear him thinking, realizing the game had changed. Your father, he finally said. Of course. You are running to your daddy like a little girl. Goodbye, Grant. This is not over, Caroline. It is not even close. Do you really think your father's money is going to protect you? You have no idea what I can do. You have no idea what I will do. Keep is mine. Was mine. He did not say who is mine. She was just a thing to him. She always had been just a thing. Leave, she said one last time. She heard his footsteps walking away. She heard the elevator doors open and then close. And then there was only silence. Caroline leaned her back against the wall. Her legs were shaking, but deep inside, she felt a small flame begin to grow. It was not quite anger and not quite hope. It was something new. She had faced him. She had not opened the door. She had set a boundary, and she had defended it. It was a small win, but it was her win. Meredith came over and put an arm on her shoulder. You did a job, Carol. I feel like I am going to be sick. That is a normal feeling. You just stood up to a bully. It takes a lot of energy out of a person. He sounded so calm at first. He made it sound like I was the one making things difficult. That is how they operate. They make you feel insane for having a normal reaction to their terrible behavior. Caroline closed her eyes and took a long, deep breath. My father is going to completely destroy him, she said in a quiet voice. Good. No, I mean he is going to really destroy him. This is not just about a divorce or who gets what. This will be total destruction. Even better. Is it a terrible thing to want that? Meredith was quiet for a second. Then she said, Do you know what is terrible? What he did to you. The lies and the manipulation. The way he makes you question your own mind, that is just awful. She gave Caroline's shoulders a firm squeeze. Whatever comes next for him, that is called justice. 3 hours later, Richard Webb's private plane landed at the executive airport. He was not by himself. Lorraine Webb was with him, her silver hair perfectly styled. She looked more like a socialite attending a charity event than a mother preparing for battle. Following them was Theodore Ashford, the family lawyer, who carried 3 leather briefcases filled with papers. And behind him was a man Caroline did not recognize. He was tall and broad, with a face like carved stone and eyes that seemed to notice everything but reveal nothing. The drive to Meredith's apartment was 30 minutes long. Caroline spent nearly all of it in her mother's embrace, not crying anymore. She had no more tears left to cry. She just let herself be held, remembering what it felt like to be safe. Richard sat across from them, saying nothing, just watching his daughter with an expression she could not understand. There was love, of course, but something else was there too. Something cold and methodical. When they got to Meredith's building, They set up in her living room, like generals in a command center. Ted laid out documents on every flat surface. Lorraine went to the small kitchen to take tea. The man with the stone face, whose name was Vincent Marshall, stood near the window, watching the street. "Daddy," Caroline finally asked, "what is going on?" Richard came and sat aside opposite her, taking her hands. His touch was warm but very firm. These were the same hands that taught her how to ride a bicycle and that had walked her down the wedding aisle. They had always represented safety. "6 months ago," he began, "I got an anonymous letter about your husband. That nameless letter was the start of everything." Richard took an envelope from his jacket pocket. It was a plain, white, standard-sized business envelope with no return address. Her father's name was typed on the front in a common font from any computer in the country. "This was delivered to my office in April by a courier," Richard explained. "No tracking, no sender, completely untraceable." He passed the envelope to Caroline. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The letter inside was typed on plain paper, single-spaced, without a signature. "Dear Mr. Webb, your daughter Caroline is married to a man who is not worthy of her. Grant Holbrook has cheated on her from the beginning of their marriage. He has stolen from her, deceived her, and he is planning to take everything she has. By the time you get this, he will have been having an affair for almost 2 years. I know you have the ability to confirm this. I urge you to do it before it's too late." "A friend." "A friend," Caroline repeated, her voice sounding empty and distant. "Who sent this?" "I do not know. At least not yet," Richard said, leaning closer. "When I first read it, I wanted to ignore it. Grant was part of the family. He was the father of my grandchild. I did not want to accept that I had been so mistaken about him." "But you believed it," she said. "I believed it needed to be investigated, quietly and carefully." Richard gestured to the stone-faced man at the window. "Vincent is a former FBI agent who now runs security for my company. I had him investigate Grant's activities without anyone knowing. Not Grant, not you, not even your mother until this past week." Caroline looked over at Vincent Marshall. He met her eyes without looking away. His expression gave nothing up. He was the type of man who observed everything but spoke only when necessary. "What did you discover?" she asked him. Vincent came forward. He placed a thick file on the coffee table. It looked like it held 200 pages of records. "The affair with Britton started 6 weeks after your wedding," he stated. His voice was flat and professional, delivering only the facts. "They first met at a hotel in Midtown Manhattan on November 2nd of that year. It was the same hotel where your husband claimed to have a business dinner. I have the credit card statements, security camera video, and cell phone location records to prove their relationship has continued from that day until now. 6 weeks. Just 6 weeks after she had promised I do. 6 weeks after their first dance as a married couple. 6 weeks after he had lovingly carried her into their new house. Just 6 weeks. But Brittany was not the only one," Vincent went on. "In the last 3 years, Grant Holbrook has been involved with at least 4 other women. Some were short affairs, some are still happening. He kept all of them completely hidden from his marriage and from each other." He opened the file, showing her photographs, screenshots of texts, and hotel bills. It was a paper trail of betrayal that stretched back through almost her entire marriage. Caroline saw pictures of women she had never seen, at restaurants she had never visited, sharing intimate moments that should have been hers. How many times had Grant kissed her goodnight before sending a text to another woman? How many work trips were actually secret vacations? How many nights had she stayed up wondering why he felt so far away, while he was really thinking of someone else? "There is something else," Richard said softly. "Something else." Caroline let out a strange, broken laugh. What more could there possibly be? Vincent took out another pile of papers. These were bank records and financial statements, pages full of numbers that just blurred together. "Your grandmother's trust fund," he explained. "The one you received on your 25th birthday. The original amount was $2,400,000. "I know about my trust fund," Caroline said. "Grant helped me open the account. He said he wanted to make sure the money was invested correctly." "Oh, he invested it correctly. Right into his own accounts," Vincent said, pointing to a single line on a statement. "Over the last 2 years, that money was moved through a series of fake companies, all controlled by Grant Holbrook, and all of it ended up in bank accounts that only he has access to. Caroline stared at the page, trying to understand the numbers. That is not possible. I would have seen it. The bank statements you saw were fake. Grant had access to your email account. He intercepted the real statements and swapped them with fakes that showed your money was safe. The account he let you see is real. It just does not hold your money any longer. $2.4 million, her grandmother's entire legacy. The money meant to protect her future and her daughter's future was gone. It was stolen by the man she had trusted more than anyone. Lorraine made a noise, a mix between a gasp and a snarl. Her calm southern grace was completely gone. That monster, she hissed through her teeth, that absolute monster. Richard calmly raised his hand, like the quiet center of a hurricane. There is one last thing, he said, and this is the most terrible part. Caroline looked at her father. His face was composed, but his eyes were filled with a terrifying coldness. What is it? Vincent produced a single document, which contained handwritten notes on a legal pad. It was Grant's handwriting. Caroline knew it instantly. 6 weeks ago, your husband had a meeting with a family lawyer. He was asking about how to get custody of an unborn child. He specifically wanted to know how to prove that a mother was mentally unfit to raise her own baby. The words didn't make sense to her at first. Caroline had to read them over and over again. I do not understand, she said. He was preparing a case against you, Richard explained in a gentle voice. He was documenting your supposed emotional issues, gathering proof of problems he created himself. The anxiety and paranoia he made up, the breakdown he was trying to cause. But why would he do that? She asked. His notes are very clear. He planned to sue for sole custody as soon as the baby was born. He was going to use everything he invented against you. Every single time he made you question yourself, every argument he started, every tear you cried, it was all just evidence for his plan. Caroline felt as if the floor had vanished from beneath her. He was not checking to see if the baby was his. He was making a plan to take her away from Caroline. It was not because he wanted to be a father. Grant never showed any real interest in being a dad. He always complained about the pregnancy, about how her body was changing, and how she was always tired and emotional. He did not want their baby. He wanted a weapon. He wanted power. He wanted to ruin her life completely, to take away everything she cared about and leave her with absolutely nothing. I need, Caroline said as she tried to get up. The world was spinning. She barely reached the bathroom before she got sick. Lorraine came in right behind her, holding back her hair and rubbing her back in soothing circles. She made soft, comforting sounds that could not touch the terror growing inside Caroline. The floor tiles felt cold against her knees. She counted them. 12 across, 18 down, the exact same count as the bathroom in her house. The house where Grant was probably sitting right now, planning what he would do next. Her baby kicked, a strong and sudden movement. It was a reminder, a promise. I will not let him take you, Caroline whispered. I will not let anyone take you. I will die before that happens. The words rose from a deep primal place inside her, a place that had nothing to do with the polite woman Grant tried to make her. She was a mother, and mothers always protect their children. When she finally came out of the bathroom, her father was standing at the window. He looked out at the city lights, at a world that just kept going, no matter what. What happens now? Caroline asked. Richard turned to face her. His expression was still calm, but his eyes told a very different story. It was a look that made her understand for the first time why people were afraid of him. Now, he said simply, we make him pay. The next 3 days were a complete blur of documents and meetings, like preparing for a war. Ted Ashford had turned Meredith's living room into a command center. Papers were spread across every surface. The glow of laptop screens lit up the coffee table. The coffee pot worked overtime, brewing a mix of caffeine and resolve. Vincent Marshall brought a steady flow of updates, each one deepening her contempt for the man she married. He revealed Grant's business was a sham, built on bad deals hidden by phony accounting and lies told to investors. It was a fragile illusion, ready to collapse at any moment. But between the strategy sessions, Caroline was lost in her memories. While reading a document, she would suddenly recall their first wedding dance. She remembered how Grant held her, his eyes wet as they moved to a classic song. Was any of that true? Did he ever really love her, or was she just a part of his plan from the very start? The memories were a crushing wave that she could not escape. Their first outing at Maison Laurent, Grant ordering flawlessly in French and gazing at her like she was a priceless treasure. The proposal in Paris, with the Eiffel Tower as a glittering backdrop, the ring she believed was a promise of forever. She remembered the early days filled with laughter, secret jokes, and him bringing her coffee in bed. When had things soured? When did the real Grant show his face? Or was he always there and she just chose not to see him? That night, Caroline sat alone, thinking of the nursery that now only existed in her dreams. The real nursery was inside a house she could no longer call home. Her thoughts turned to her grandmother, Eleanor Webb, the woman whose trust fund Grant had plundered. Grandma Eleanor was an unstoppable woman. She was for 52 years and raised 3 kids during the Depression. She started a little bakery that grew into a successful business. She never accepted excuses from anyone. She passed away when Caroline was 19, but her advice remained. Some people give their entire hearts, my dear, her grandmother once told her after a high school breakup. And others are only pretending to. The sad part is that you cannot see the difference until the damage is done, and the damage was done. It was too late to reverse the marriage, too late to get back the money, too late to undo the humiliation, but it was not too late to strike back. Her phone vibrated, a message from Grant. It was the 47th text she had received. It said, "I know your father is with you. You might feel powerful now, but you are making a huge mistake, Caroline. You will regret this for the rest of your days. Come back, and we can work this out. We can still be a family." She did not bother to read it again. She simply erased the message and set her phone aside. Richard discovered her sitting in the darkened apartment a while later. She was on the fire escape, watching the rain fall over the city lights. "You need to get some sleep," he said, joining her on the metal steps. "I cannot. When I close my eyes, I see what happened. The spit, his laughter, all of it. That feeling will go away in time." "Will it?" she asked her father. "Have you ever been betrayed so badly? By someone you trusted with everything?" Richard paused for a long time as the rain fell around them. A distant siren wailed. "Once," he finally said. "It was a long time ago before I met your mother." "What happened?" "I was young and naive. I trusted a partner who was stealing from me. He took money, clients, ideas, everything. By the time I figured it out, I had nearly lost my entire business." "What did you do?" Richard offered a cold smile. "I ruined him, not with my hands, but with something far more effective. I revealed every lie, every scam, and every person he had ever double-crossed. When I was finished, he could not find work as a janitor, much less an executive. Did that help? Did getting even make you feel better?" "For a short time, yes. But then the feeling faded." He looked at her with kind eyes. "Revenge feels good for a moment, but it does not fix what is broken inside you. Only time can do that. Time and the support of people who care about you." Caroline leaned her head on her father's shoulder. She had not done that since she was a little girl before she grew up and became too independent. "I am so scared, Daddy. I know. Not of him, but of me. Of what I could become if I let this anger consume me. Anger is a tool. You can use it to tear things down, or you can use it to build something new. It is your choice. What do you think I should do?" Richard thought for a second. "I think you should let me handle the tearing down. You should focus your energy on building a new life for you and my granddaughter." The following morning, Richard gathered the team. Ted Ashford laid out 3 different plans. Lorraine wrote everything down. Vincent stood near the door, alert and prepared. "Option 1, Ted began. We arrange for a quiet divorce. All the docs are private. The settlement is confidential. Grant gets some money, but he stays away from you and the baby. Nothing gets out to the press." "No," Caroline said firmly. "He does not get to have it easy. Option 2 is we tell the world everything. The cheating, the theft, the custody plot. We ruin his name and his company all at once. He loses it all. And the third option," Richard said, "is we wait. We let him make the next mistake. We let him dig his own hole deeper, and then we bury him in it for good." Caroline considered Grant's immense pride, his belief that he was above it all. He thought his money and charm made him invincible. He would definitely slip up. He was too arrogant not to. "Option 3, she declared. but he only has 1 week to make a move. If he does nothing in 7 days, we go public with the whole story. Richard nodded, looking unsurprised. There is one more thing, Ted said. Vincent found something this morning. Everyone looked at the former federal agent. Grant has been talking to a reporter, a tabloid writer named Jessica Crane. She's known for writing scandals about rich families. Grant is planning to spin the story first. He will claim Caroline is unstable. Not a credible source, just a jealous wife making things up. It was a classic move. Ruin her reputation before she had a chance to speak the truth. When? Richard asked. He is feeding her bits of information right now, shaping his story. The article could be published any day. A cold dread washed over Caroline. Every weakness she had ever shown him, every vulnerability she had ever shared, he had stored it away. It was all ammunition for this exact moment. The anxiety she admitted to, the therapy, the fights where she had begged him to care. All of those moments were now weapons aimed directly at her. He has been setting this up for months, she said aloud, maybe even years. He was building his case against me just in case. That is how narcissists operate, Vincent said. They are always planning. To them, relationships are just games they have to win. So what is our move? Richard stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city he had worked so hard to conquer. We will not wait for his story to come out, he said. We will release our own first, but we will not use accusations. We will use proof, solid and undeniable proof that makes him look like a desperate liar. The video from the office, Ted said. Exactly. Nothing he says about Caroline will matter when the entire world sees what he actually did, when they see him laugh while his lover spits on his pregnant wife. Caroline imagined that video online, with millions of people seeing her at her absolute worst. Her deepest humiliation turned into a viral spectacle. I do not think I can do that, she said in a small voice. I cannot let everyone see that and let strangers pass judgment on me. Lorraine held her hand. You will not face it by yourself, she said. We will be right there with you, and they will not be judging you. They will be judging him. Your mother is right, Richard added. That video is not proof of your weakness. It is proof of cruelty. People will not see a victim. They will see a survivor. Caroline looked at the faces in the room, at her parents, at Ted, at Vincent, and at Meredith, who had stayed by her side. She was not by herself. She had a team. She had just forgotten what it felt like to have that kind of support. All right, she said. Let us do it. Grant Holbrook arrived home that Thursday evening to find his entire life dumped on the front lawn. There were 3 suitcases, 5 boxes, and a heap of designer suits thrown over the bushes. His golf clubs were strewn on the grass, and his expensive Watchka collection sparkled in the evening sun. The front door was shut. A brand new deadbolt was installed on the door. He realized the locks had been changed while he was gone. Caroline observed everything from a window upstairs. She had wanted to confront him on the porch, to stand there strong and proud, but Richard had persuaded her to remain inside. He wanted to protect her and the baby from Grant's unpredictable temper. From a hidden spot, she saw her husband's perfect world start to fall apart. Grant was frozen in the driveway for what felt like an eternity, his mouth hanging open. You could see the shock, then denial, and then raw panic wash over his face. He finally moved, marching to the front door like a man who thought he still owned the world. He banged his fist on the wood. 3 loud bangs echoed inside. He yelled, Caroline, Caroline, open up this instant. Silence. This is my house. You cannot do this to me. This is illegal. Suddenly the door opened, and Richard Webb was standing there. Lined up behind him were Lorraine Hyen, Ted Ashford, and Vincent Marshall, a human wall of people who were done faking it with Grant Holbrook. Richard smiled warmly. Grant, he said, what an unexpected pleasure. For a split second, Grant's confident swagger vanished. Then he put his mask of control right back on. Richard, he said, trying to force a smile that looked painful and scared. This is a surprise. I had no idea you were in town. I bet there is a lot you did not realize. Look, whatever Caroline said, this is just a big misunderstanding. We had a couple argument. It is perfectly normal. Everyone just needs to calm down. Calm down? Richard's voice was soft, almost gentle. You want us to be calm? Yes. This whole thing is being blown completely out of proportion. Caroline is just being emotional. You know, the pregnancy hormones. You know how women can be. If I could just speak with her. I saw the video. Grant froze. What video? The one from the hidden security camera in your office. The one you did not know about. I watched your mistress spit right in my daughter's face, and I watched you laugh. Should I describe how you looked? You seemed to be having a great time. His composure finally started to crack. You could see real fear in his eyes. That was taken out of context. Brittany and I were just playing around. Caroline just came in at a bad time. At the wrong moment? Richard moved forward one single step, but the move was so menacing it made Grant step backward. My daughter walked in to see you with your mistress, and then that woman assaulted her. And you just laughed. It was not an assault. Spitting on a person is assault. In fact, it is considered battery. It is usually a misdemeanor, but it becomes a felony when the victim is pregnant. Richard smiled a chilling smile. Which, of course, my daughter is. The color drained from Grant's face. He was starting to understand the gravity of the situation. This mess was not going away. He could not talk his way out of this one. What do you want? He asked, his voice suddenly small and weak. I want to watch you suffer. I want to tear down everything you have ever built. And I want every single person who ever respected you to know what kind of monster you truly are. Richard, please, he begged. We can figure this out. I can explain it all. Can you explain how you stole $2.4 million from my daughter's trust fund? Can you explain your notes about taking her baby from her? Can you explain the 4 other women you cheated with during your marriage? With every new charge, Grant seemed to get smaller. The powerful businessman was gone. All that was left was a small, ugly, and pathetic man. I have no idea what you are talking about. Of course you do not. Richard looked at Vincent. Show him. Vincent came forward holding the folder Caroline remembered from 3 days before. He presented photos, papers, and bank records a full history of Grant Holbrook's misdeeds.
We have it all,
Richard stated.
Every affair, every stolen dollar, every scheme to ruin my daughter. It is all proven, confirmed, and ready to go public.
You cannot prove that. We can, and we will prove every bit of it. Unless, Grant looked up like a drowning man searching for anything to hold on to. Unless what? Unless you sign the papers Mr. Ashford has right here. A complete divorce, Caroline gets full custody, and you return all the money you stole. You leave with only what you came with, which was not much at all. Grant was silent for a long time, his eyes scanning for any way out, any loophole. There was none, and if I sign, everything disappears. The video, all this evidence? If you sign, I will spare you today. But do not be mistaken, Grant. The evidence is not going anywhere. It stays with me. As a promise, you will behave. If you go near my daughter again, or try to see my granddaughter, or even mention her name, I will release it all. Then I will use all my resources to ensure you never have a career again. The threat was clear and absolute, hanging heavy in the air. Just then, a red Porsche drove up, and Brittany Mercer got out. Her high heels clicked on the pavement as she looked at the mess. The stuff on the grass, the stern faces on the porch, and the defeated man standing between them. What is happening? You handled everything. You said her father was no threat to you. Brittany, Grant said, in a rush, this is a really bad time. Miss Mercer, Richard cut in. How perfect. I was hoping to have a word with you. Brittany's smug look wavered. I have nothing to say to you. That is all right, because I have plenty to say to you. Richard walked down the steps, taking his time. Are you aware of the punishment for felony assault on a pregnant woman in this state? Assault? Brittany laughed nervously. I do not know what you are talking about. I am referring to the video of you spitting on my daughter and the police report that was filed this morning. I am also talking about the criminal charges being filed right now. That was just a joke. Grant said it was okay. He said she was just being dramatic. Grant says many things. I doubt the judge will believe him as easily as you did. Brittany stared at Grant, her face twisting as she simply understood. She was realizing he had used her, that she meant that his promises to her were as empty as his promises to Caroline. Grant, tell them it was all your idea, that you told me to do it. Brittany, be quiet. You said it would help your divorce case. You said you needed proof that she was unstable. I said shut up. Grant's voice broke, and his composure shattered into a million pieces. What lay beneath was a desperate, ugly man watching his entire life crumble. Caroline had witnessed enough. She came down the stairs and stepped onto the porch, seeing her husband for who he truly was. He seemed like a total stranger. No, he looked like his true self, the real Grant Holbrook, hidden behind his charm, money, and lies. "Sign the papers, Grant," she said, her voice surprisingly firm and strong. "Just sign them and leave. It is better than what you deserve." Grant stared at her. For a second, something flashed in his eyes. It could have been regret, or it could have been another selfish plan.
Caroline, baby, please, we can fix this. I know I messed up, but I love you. I have always loved you. Everything I did was for us.
For our family. No. The word was final, like a door slamming to shut. You do not get to say that. You do not get to stand there and act like any of this was about love. I finally know what love is, and this is not it. It never was. She looked at Ted Ashford. "Give him the papers." Ted handed over a thick pile of documents. Caroline watched Grant's face fall as he flipped through the pages, realizing he was completely trapped. It detailed the full divorce, her sole custody, the return of all the money, and a strict gag order. "This is extortion," Grant hissed. "These are consequences," Richard corrected him. "Sign it now, or we will see you in a courtroom and on the front page of every paper. The choice is yours." Grant took one last look around. He looked at the wife he had cheated on, the father-in-law he had misjudged, and the mistress who now saw his true colors. He looked at the future he had thrown away. He signed every single page, his handwriting growing tighter and more panicked with each signature. When finished, Ted took the documents, confirmed every signature, and gave Richard a nod. "We are done here," Richard announced. "Get your things off the lawn. You have 15 minutes. Then Vincent will see you out." Grant remained silent and started collecting his things. Brittany stood by her car, motionless, watching the man she thought she knew turn into a coward before her eyes. Caroline returned to the house. She had seen enough. The wind felt good for a moment, but it was hollow inside. Revenge was not the same as healing. It was just another kind of pain. But it was a beginning. The peace lasted for exactly 6 days. On the 7th day, a tabloid story hit like a bombshell. Billionaire's daughter ruins innocent husband with shocking claims of abuse. Jessica Crane's name was right under the headline. She was the reporter Grant had been secretly talking to for months. The article was just as Vincent had warned, a vicious attack on her character, pretending to be a news story. It described Caroline as unstable and jealous, a paranoid woman who made up an affair because she could not handle her failing marriage. Model anonymous sources spoke her strange behavior, her constant emotional outbursts, and her obsession with her husband's every move. Grant even did an interview. He cried for the camera, with actual tears rolling down his handsome face as he talked about his broken heart. He sobbed, "I just want to see my child. Caroline will not let me anywhere near my own baby. I have tried everything possible. I have begged her. I have pleaded with her, but her family has completely turned her against me. They have filled her head with poison against the man who loves her. His performance was perfect." Grant's voice cracked at all the right times. His eyes shined with perfectly timed tears. He truly looked like the victim. He sounded like the victim, and millions of people fell for it. Caroline watched the interview from her laptop, sitting alone in a room at her parents' large home. She had moved back there after their fight, unable to bear staying in the house they once shared. The comment section was vicious. "Poor man, being ruined by a rich family. She sounds totally crazy. This is typical gold digger behavior. Those web people think they can buy their way out of anything, even ruining an innocent man. He clearly loved her, and she just threw it all away." She kept scrolling and scrolling. Every single comment felt like a small knife. Each accusation felt like a wound that would never heal. She knew she needed to stop reading, that it was like poison, but she could not make herself look away. "Maybe they have a point," a little voice whispered in her head. It was a voice that sounded like Grant, the one that had told her for years she was crazy, paranoid, and never good enough. "Maybe I am the unstable one. Maybe I made everything worse than it had to be. Perhaps the spitting was not so bad. Maybe I should have just let it go. Maybe this is all my fault." The self-doubt was crushing her. Years of being manipulated had carved paths in her brain. These paths always led her to blame herself, to downplay her own pain, and to wonder if she was the real problem. At 3 in the morning, she finally called Meredith. "Please tell me I am not losing my mind." "You are not losing your mind. Meredith's voice was heavy with sleep, but her words were sharp and sure. He is manipulating you. He is manipulating the entire country. But what if I lose? What if the court believes him? What if they take my baby away? That is not going to happen. Your father has power Grant can only dream of. The truth is on your side, is not it? Because it does not feel that way. It feels like the whole world hates me. It feels like I have become the bad guy in my own life story. The internet is not the whole world. The people who truly know you know the truth. The people who love you know the truth. That is all that matters. Caroline held the phone tightly to her ear. The connection was weak and crackled with static, but it gave her something to hold on to. I am just so tired, Mur. I am so tired of fighting a battle I never start. I am so tired of defending myself from all these lies. I'm so tired of being the villain. I know, my dear, I know. But this is almost finished. Your father is about to reveal to the world who Grant really is. Just try to hold on for a little while longer. The week that followed was even worse. There were more articles and more interviews. Grant's story spread like a wildfire on social media. People who did not know either of them picked sides, passed judgment, and turned their marriage into a source of entertainment. Caroline could not leave her parents' property without photographers following her. She could not go to a doctor's visit without people staring at her. She could not live her life without being watched, judged, and taken apart. She started to feel like a small animal being hunted. She was trapped with no place left to hide. Her doctor started to worry. All the stress was beginning to affect the pregnancy. Her blood pressure was too high. The baby's heart rate was showing signs of trouble during checkups. You have to get some rest, Dr. Patricia Owens told her firmly. You need to stay away from the internet. You have to stop letting this man live inside your head for free. How? How can I do that when he is everywhere? When millions of people are convinced I am some kind of monster, you focus on what is real. Focus on the baby growing inside you, on the people who truly love you. Focus on the new life you are going to create after this is all behind you. Dr. Owens gently took her hand. He wants to see you break. Caroline, that is his entire plan. Proving you are unstable is the last move he has left. Do not let him win. That evening, Caroline sat in the dark in her old childhood bedroom. It was the room where she used to dream about her future, the room where she had pictured a life filled with love, happiness, and children who would never experience any pain. The walls were still covered with the posters from when she was a teenager. She saw movie stars she could not remember and bands she did not listen to anymore. They were all reminders of the person she was before Grant, before the big house, the marriage, and the constant sacrifice of herself. She reached for her phone, opened her photos, and scrolled back through years of memories. There she was at her wedding, looking so bright and hopeful, absolutely certain she had found her forever. There she was on their honeymoon, laughing on a beautiful beach in Bali, with Grant's arm around her, his smile looking so big and real.
He was there. She was announcing her first pregnancy, the one she lost.
Her face was shining with a joy that would soon be taken from her. And there, in pictures she had almost forgotten, was the woman she used to be before Grant. She was confident, independent, and full of her own plans and dreams that had nothing to do with being someone's wife. Whatever happened to her? Where did that woman go? The answer came to her softly, like a whisper from deep within. She did not go anywhere. She just fell asleep. And now it is time for her to wake up. The baby gave a strong, determined kick. It was a reminder that life keeps going, that the future was not yet decided, and that her story was far from over. Caroline put her phone down, dried her tears, and made a firm decision. She would not let Grant Holbrook control who she was. Not now. Not ever again. She had been completely broken, but from all of those broken pieces, something new was starting to grow. Richard Webb scheduled his press conference for a Thursday morning. The timing was planned perfectly. It would get the most attention in the news cycle. It would reach the largest audience, and it would cause the most damage to Grant Holbrook. The event was held in the large ballroom of the Webb Foundation building. There were 300 journalists, 15 camera crews, and people from every big news channel in the country. Caroline watched everything from a private room upstairs. Her mother sat right next to her, holding her hand tightly. Meredith was on her other side. Dr. Owens had told her not to attend in person. It was too stressful and too risky, but she had to see it. She needed to witness the exact moment when the truth was finally revealed. Richard stood at the speaker's stand. His finest suit, the one he reserved for important board meetings and government hearings. Behind him, a giant screen showed the Web Industries logo. It looked professional, official, and completely intimidating. "Thank you all for being here," he started. His voice was calm and controlled, the voice of a man who had already won before the fight even began.
I am here today to set the record straight about a false story that has been spreading in the media, a story created by my former son-in-law, Grant Holbrook.
The room became completely quiet. 300 journalists leaned in to listen. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Holbrook did an interview where he claimed to be the victim of a hateful wife and her powerful family. He cried on television. He asked for people's sympathy. He portrayed himself as an innocent man being destroyed by things he could not control. Richard paused for a moment, letting the suspense build. "Today, I am going to show you what really happened." The large screen behind him came to life. It was security footage in high definition and perfectly clear. It showed Grant's office. The afternoon sun was shining through the windows. Brittany Mercer was sitting on the edge of the desk. Then Caroline walked through the door, holding a bouquet of flowers. The entire room watched in complete silence as the events unfolded on the screen. They heard the conversation, the insults, the gathering of saliva, and saw the spit hit Caroline's face, followed by Grant Holbrook's laughter. The video played 3 times. By the 3rd time, some of the journalists had to look away. Others were openly weeping. The horror of what they were witnessing was real and could not be denied. "My daughter stood there, 7 months pregnant," Richard said after the video ended, with her husband's mistress's spit on her face, and her husband laughed. He let that thought hang in the air for a long moment. "But the assault you just saw is only a small fraction of Mr. Holbrook's crimes against my daughter. Today, I will provide evidence of constant emotional abuse, financial crimes, and a detailed to steal custody of his own child." The evidence was presented in steady waves. First, financial papers, bank records showing theft from the Flames trust fund, money transfers to fake companies, and the paper trail of $2.4 million vanishing into Grant's personal accounts. Then came the custody papers. They showed Grant's notes on how to prove Caroline was mentally unstable, his meetings with divorce lawyers, and his plan to take the baby right after it was born. Then it was time for the other women. One after another, they walked up to the speaker's stand, each holding her own file of evidence, each with her own story of being showered with affection, then manipulated, and finally thrown away. Victoria Patterson, a senator's daughter, spoke with quiet grace about the 2 years she wasted believing she was special to him. Margaret Orenchen, a marketing director, described the abortion Grant had forced her into and the silence he demanded from her afterward. Lisa Rodriguez, a graduate student, explained how Grant had used his influence to advance her career and what he had demanded from her in return. And then, in a move that shocked everyone, Brittany Mercer appeared. She walked to the microphone wearing a simple black dress with no makeup on her face and no hint of defiance, just a woman who had finally accepted the truth. "I truly loved him," she confessed, her voice raspy from endless crying. "I loved him enough to become his tool. He claimed Caroline was evil, that she had him trapped in a fake marriage. I fell for all of it." Her voice broke. "When I spit on her, I thought I was protecting the man I loved. I believed I was securing our future, but I was just a piece he could throw away." She looked straight into the camera. "Caroline, if you can see this, I am sorry. I am truly sorry. My actions were unforgivable, I know. But now I see him for who he is, and I promise I will help make him pay for hurting us all." Questions poured in as reporters yelled and cameras flashed. The story went viral instantly. By evening, public opinion had completely flipped. Grant Holbrook interview was shown again and again, but his tears looked like a calculated performance, nothing but pure manipulation. His desperate pleas for pity now sounded like pure narcissism. His act was revealed for what it was, a scam artist dodging his own mess. Partners bailed and investors panicked. The board demanded he resign. The man who laughed as his pregnant wife was humiliated became America's most despised figure. But the ultimate betrayal came from a surprising source. A hand-delivered letter for Caroline arrived the next morning at the estate. She opened it, for in her father's study as her parents and looked on. The script was beautiful and classic, a style from another era. Dear Caroline, 8 months ago, I sent your father an anonymous note. It was the note that began the investigation into my son. I have seen Grant transform into a monster. I watched him hurt so many women. He lied and cheated without a second thought. I told myself it was not my place to interfere. But seeing his cruelty toward you and knowing his plans for your child, I had to act. I love my son, and I always will. But my love cannot excuse his evil actions. And Grant has become evil. I am not asking for forgiveness, because I do not deserve it. I should have done something sooner. I missed the warning signs when he was a boy. I failed to raise a good man. All I can give you now is the truth. I also promise, if you let me, to be there for my grandchild. I want to be your ally, not just Grant's mother. I want to fix some of the harm my family has done. With deepest regret and hope, Diane Holbrook. Caroline read the letter 3 times. Grant's mother, the very woman who raised him and always took his side at parties. She was the one who sent the anonymous tip. She began the whole investigation that ultimately saved Caroline. Did you know about this? Caroline asked her father. Richard shook his head. I had my suspicions. I wondered who could know those details, but I never proved it. Why would she betray her own son? Lorraine answered softly. Because she saw the monster he became. She chose you over her own comfortable lies. Caroline studied the beautiful handwriting on the page. It came from a mother who chose her little-known daughter-in-law over her own son. Maybe the Holbrook family was not entirely monstrous. The divorce became official on a Tuesday. It was exactly 3 months after the horrible incident. The courtroom was calm and orderly, a stark contrast to the recent media frenzy. Grant's lawyer spoke calmly. Ted Ashford was just as professional. The judge went through the paperwork efficiently, like she had done this 1,000 times before. The mother received full custody. The trust money was to be returned. The house would stay in Mrs. Holbrook's name. Mr. Holbrook was denied visitation until the child was 3 years old. Then visits must be supervised. Grant sat at his table looking small and defeated. He seemed to have physically shrunken with his reputation. He never once looked her way during the entire hearing. He could not meet her gaze. He could not face the woman he worked so hard to break. When the gavel fell, Caroline felt empty. She thought she would feel joy or relief. Instead, there was just a void where her marriage once was. It is finished, Ted Ashford said, leaving the courthouse. You won. Did I really? She asked. Ted gave her a knowing look. It may not feel like now, but wait. This is all very new. 3 weeks later, Caroline's labor began. It started at 2 o'clock in the morning. A sudden, sharp pain in her back woke her up. Then another came, followed by a rush of warm fluid. Mom, she cried out, it's happening. The hours that followed were a mix of pain, fear, and excitement. Lorraine and Meredith held her hands. Richard paced nervously in the hall. Push, urged Dr. Owen. One last push, Caroline. You can do it. She gave it all of her remaining strength after a long, hard fight. Then she heard a tiny, beautiful cry. It was the best sound she had ever heard. It's a girl, the doctor announced with a huge smile. She is healthy and strong. You did it, Caroline. They laid the baby on her. She was a tiny, perfect thing, red and screaming with fury. Eleanor? Caroline whispered softly. Your name is Eleanor, for your great-grandmother. The infant quieted, her eyes unfocused, and Caroline's heart melted. This was nothing like her love for Grant. That was a mix of hope and desperation disguised as love. This was a deeper instinctual bond that changed her completely. This was her child, her future. She would fiercely protect her no matter what. Richard entered the room a moment later. He just stood there, staring at his new granddaughter in pure awe. She's perfect, he said. His voice choked with emotion. Just perfect. She has your chin, Lorraine noted, and her mother's eyes, and hopefully none of her father personality. The attempt at humor did not land, but it was all right. Some pain takes a long time to heal, and some scars always remain. The following months passed in a haze of eating and changing diapers. Caroline bought a new home, much smaller than her old one. It was a 3-bedroom cottage on a peaceful street. It had white shutters, a blue door, and a garden for the spring. Her parents wanted to get her a much bigger place. They offered a mansion or a penthouse, But Caroline refused. She wanted something that was entirely her own. A place she chose, with no connection to any man's name. It would be just her and Eleanor, starting a new life. Diane Holbrook came to visit when Eleanor was 6 weeks old. She arrived by herself without any warning. She was just an older woman on the porch, holding a stuffed rabbit. "I did not know if you would see me," Diane admitted. "I was not sure either," Caroline replied. They sat together in the living room. Eleanor was sleeping in her bassinet nearby. The unspoken topic was Grant. His crimes, his absence, and his mother's choice. "How is he?" Caroline finally asked. "Not good," Diane answered, her voice tired and empty. "He lost it all. The business, the money, and all his fake friends. He lives in a tiny apartment now and works in sales. I tried to help, but he refuses to talk to me." It was because of her letter, because she told the truth. Diane looked at the baby. He was never meant to be a father. I knew it before the wedding, but I had hope. I hoped being a dad would make him a better man. It never would have. "No, it would not have," Diane agreed. They sat quietly for a moment. The clock ticked on the wall. Eleanor stirred in her sleep. "I do not forgive him," Caroline said at last. "I never will. I am not asking you to. But I do understand the sacrifice you made. You chose me over your son." Tears welled up in Diane's eyes. "He is still my son, and I will always love him. But love does not mean you accept their bad behavior. Sometimes love is stopping them from causing more pain. Can I ask a question?" "Of course. When did you first see it? When did you know who he truly was?" Diane paused for a long time. Her voice was far away when she finally answered. "He was 8 years old. We had a sweet cat named Marmalade. I found him in the yard with her one afternoon. He was slowly pulling out her fur, piece by piece. The cat was in pain, but Grant was just smiling." A chill ran down Caroline's spine. "What have I done? I convinced myself it was just a phase. Boys will be boys, a fascination with small creatures. I invented any reason I could, because the truth meant admitting something was terribly wrong with my son." Diane dabbed at her tears. "For 30 years I have made excuses. 30 years of watching him cause pain and pretending it was not so bad. I am done now." Eleanor shifted and made a soft noise. A flicker of hope crossed Diana's face. "May I hold her, just for a little while?" Caroline paused for a moment. This was Grant's mother, the woman who created the man that tried to ruin her. Yet, she was also the person who finally stopped him, choosing what was right over family and was now trying to mend things. "Of course," Caroline said, "you can hold her." Diane carefully lifted Eleanor from her crib, holding her with the natural skill of a grandmother. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face.
"Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your grandma, and I swear to you, no one will ever harm you, not even my own son."
2 years later, I was in her garden on a sunny September day. The roses were in full bloom, a vibrant mix of red, pink, and yellow. She had planted them that first spring in her new home. They had flourished, climbing the fence in a beautiful burst of color. Eleanor, now 2 years old, waddled through the grass, walking, talking, and asking the question why about 800 times each day. She had her mother's eyes and Grant's chin, but her spirit was uniquely hers. "Mama, see." Eleanor pointed to a butterfly with orange and black wings.
"A monarch."
"It is pretty, yes, my love. It is very pretty. Can I touch it?" "It is better if we just watch. Butterflies do not like being touched." "Why?" "Because their wings are very fragile. They must be perfect to fly." "Why?" "Because flying is how they travel where they need to go." "Why?" Karen chuckled. The constant questions once wore her out. Now she found them delightful, a sign of a curious mind that always wanted to learn about the world. "Because that is simply the way butterflies are, sweetheart." Eleanor seemed to accept this, at least for the moment. But Caroline knew more questions were coming. They always did. The doorbell chimed. Meredith was on the doorstep, holding a bottle of wine with a knowing look. "Happy anniversary," she said. "What anniversary? It has been 2 years since the divorce was final. I thought we should celebrate." They sat on the back patio as Eleanor played with her sand toys. The afternoon sun felt warm. The wine was chilled. Her world felt calm in a way it had not for a very long time. "Did you see the news?" Meredith asked. "I tried to avoid it. Grant's company formally went bankrupt yesterday." Chapter 7. A total liquidation. Absolutely nothing is left. Caroline drank her wine and watched her daughter make a sandcastle. She felt no joy, no sense of victory, just a feeling of exhaustion and freedom. And what about him? He is in the same small apartment with the same sales position. His name's Ms. Mudd. Nobody wants to work with him. Meredith paused. He tried to get visitation rights again last month. I know. Ted took care of it. It was denied again. Good. They sat together in a comfortable quiet. The kind of quiet shared between true friends, people who have witnessed each other at their lowest points and still offered love. I ran into Brittany last week, Meredith mentioned. Caroline glanced up at her. Where? At a support meeting for survivors of domestic violence. She has been attending for almost a year, facing what she went through, what she did, and what was done to her. Is she doing okay? She is getting better. She asked how you were. She wanted to know if you were happy. Caroline pictured Brittany, the woman who spat at her, the woman used as a tool by the man they had both once loved. Tell her I am doing well, Caroline said at last. Tell her I hope she is able to find some peace. You are not angry with her anymore. I am still angry, but my anger is not for her. She was a pawn, just like I was. Grant was manipulating both of us. The only real difference is that I saw the truth before she did. The afternoon wore on. Eleanor left the sandbox for apple slices, then requested a story, and then asked to be pushed on the swing. This was her life now. Simple moments, small pleasures, the non-stop, tiring, wonderful job of being a mother. It was completely different from what she had pictured when she married Grant Holbrook, far from the big high house and the fancy parties and the ideal wealthy lifestyle. It was so much better. Later that night, after Eleanor was asleep and Meredith went home, Caroline sat in her living room, looking at the pictures on the shelf. There was Eleanor on her first birthday, face covered in cake, laughing with joy.
There was Caroline and her parents on Christmas, with the glowing tree behind them, all of them smiling. And Eleanor meeting Diane Holbrook for the very first time.
The older woman's face streaked with tears, and a single photo from long ago, Caroline at her college graduation. Before Grant, before the wedding, before all of it. The young woman in that picture seemed so different, so much more hopeful, completely unaware of the heartbreak ahead. But she also looked stronger, more genuine, more sure of who she was and what she wanted. Caroline was slowly becoming that person once more. Not identical, never identical, but similar. Rebuilt from the broken parts into something stronger. The prison door was never really locked, she realized. I was my own jailer. I was serving a sentence Grant created, but one I decided to accept. Getting out was not about discovering a key. It was about realizing the door was open the whole time. Her phone vibrated. It was a text from her dad. Dinner. On Sunday. Yes. We'll bring Eleanor. Wonderful. Your mother is making her pot roast. Please tell her I love her. You can tell her yourself. I am not your personal messenger. Carolyn smiled and put her phone down. She walked to Eleanor's room and stood in the doorway, watching her little girl sleep. Some nights, she still had to check her phone 3 times. Lock, unlock, lock. But now, it was to look at the baby monitor. Old patterns were transforming into new ones. The 3 in the morning worries still visited. But now they were about Eleanor's first words, not about everything she had done wrong. She had saved one picture from her wedding day. It was not of Grant. It was of her father walking her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. That was the love that was true. That was the love that had rescued her. We are going to be just fine, Eleanor, she whispered to her sleeping child. We already are. And she was absolutely right. 5 years later, Caroline was at a podium speaking to 300 people. It was the Webb Foundation's yearly gala, the most important charity event of the year, raising funds for the cause that had become Caroline's life mission. 7 years ago, she began. I was a woman who had lost her way, lost inside a marriage, lost in another person's idea of me, and lost in the idea that my value came from a man who never deserved me. The audience was completely quiet, listening intently, with all eyes on her. I was mistreated, manipulated, and made to believe my own thoughts were wrong, that my emotions were irrational, and that I deserved the way I was treated. She stopped, scanning the faces in the crowd. Some were kind, some were intrigued, and some were fellow survivors, hearing their own experiences in her story. Today, the Webb Foundation helps more than 2,000 women annually. Women escaping abusive situations, women putting their lives back together, women discovering, just as I had to, that their worth is not decided by anyone else. Eleanor was in the front row, now 7 years old, smart, curious, and completely without fear. She had asked to attend that night, insisted on her fanciest dress, and told Caroline she wanted to see her mom be brave. I am not here to discuss my former husband. His chapter ended a long time ago and was never very compelling to begin with. I am here to discuss the women who are the heart of this foundation, the women who would not be defined by their darkest times, the women who rose from the ashes and remade themselves. She glanced at her daughter, her parents, and Meredith, who had always been there, at Diane Holbrook, who came to every gala and gave generously to the organization. Healing is not a finish line. It is a process. Some days are more difficult than others. Some wounds never quite disappear. But with every day we decide to move forward, we prove a vital truth. We show that we are more than the bad things that happened. We are more than the individuals who hurt us. We are survivors, and survivors are the most resilient people on earth. The clapping started softly, then grew louder, becoming a roar of applause. Caroline came down from the stage. Eleanor ran to her, wrapping her arms tightly around her mother's waist. "You did so good, Mama." "Thank you, my sweet girl." "Were you nervous?" "A little bit, but then I recalled something very important." "What was it?" Carolyn knelt to meet her daughter's gaze, the same eyes she saw in her own reflection. "I remembered that being brave isn't about not feeling scared. It is about doing the scary thing even when you are afraid. And I remembered that I am not by myself. I have you and Grandma and Grandpa and all the people who care about us." Eleanor hugged her again, a strong, fierce hug from a child who had never known terror, who had never witnessed her mother weeping in a bathroom at 3 in the morning, and who believed with the pure faith of a child that everything was always going to be all right. And as she looked at her daughter, Caroline believed it as well, not because the hurt was gone, because it would never fully vanish. The insults, the laugh, the years of deception, they were now a part of her. They were part of her history, but they were not the complete story. The complete story included this very moment, this room filled with support, this daughter who would grow up understanding what true love really is. This was the future she had created from nothing but her own determination and the people who loved her. The story ended with healing. Some nights, Caroline still dreamed of that day in Grant's office. She still woke up feeling the phantom spit on her cheek. She still felt the burn of that humiliation deep in her. But then she would look at her life, at her daughter, and at the foundation that had helped thousands of women find their own strength. And then she would remember that the best revenge is not causing destruction. The best revenge is building a beautiful life in spite of everything. The scar was not gone. Some things always leave a mark, but marks can become maps, reminding you where you have been and why you can never go back. And Caroline Webb, the woman who was once Caroline Holbrook, had no plans to ever go back. Only forward, only upward, only toward freedom. And that is the story of Caroline Webb, a woman who walked through fire and became stronger on the other side. If this story moved you, if you felt her pain and cheered for her victory, I would truly love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below. Tell me what moment affected you the most. Was it the spit, the laugh, or was it when her father finally showed Grant Holbrook what real power looks like? And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone fighting their own battle, please share it with them. Sometimes, just knowing you are not alone is the first step to finding your own inner strength. Hit that like button if you believe that what goes around comes around. And if you are new here, welcome to our family. Subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss another story. Because every single week we bring you tales of betrayal, redemption, and the type of justice that only life can serve. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. You are the reason I do this. Until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and always remember, living well is the best revenge.